Just when the Seahawks thought they were going to get healthier on the defensive line, injuries are striking again, leading up to Thursday's crucial game against the 49ers in prime time. Uchenna Nwosu specifically is out for at least 4 more games. We're going to be taking a deep dive into what that means for Seattle's defense this week and moving forward on a jam-packed Tuesday episode of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to all the 12s out there, whether you're listening from Wenatchee, Washington, or if you're overseas in Paris, France. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Believe it or not, we're only 2 days away from kickoff at Lumen Field, Thursday night, Seahawks 49ers. And that means we've got a special matchup Tuesday episode as we take a deep dive into all the key positional battles to watch when Seattle and San Francisco duke it out once again under the lights at Lumen Field. This episode is brought your way by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Now for your lead story here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Just when Seattle thought that their defensive line was going to start coming together, healthier players, the injuries have stricken this team again. Most notably, Uchenna Nwosu, who yesterday Mike McDonald said was not going to play on Thursday night, but wasn't able to provide any further specifics beyond that point. We now know, according to a report from Mike Garafolo of NFL Network, Rob, that Nwosu is going to go on injured reserve, which means he's going to miss at least the next 4 games, if not longer. And there are more reports that have come out there. Jason Puckett, formerly of KJR, now running the Puck Sports radio show, he said that Garafolo told him that it's going to be longer than 4 games, but it's not season ending. Look, there's no way to sugarcoat this. This is a big loss for the Seahawks because when they got Nwosu back on Sunday against the Giants, that was viewed as the missing piece for that front line. We know how good of a run defender that Nwosu is, and having him last just 20 snaps before he injures his thigh. This is a new injury. This is not the sprained knee that he was dealing with coming out of the preseason. It's a totally different injury. It has just been one injury after another. A lot of bad luck for Nwosu ever since he signed that contract extension 2 Julys ago. He has played in just 7 games, and he's going to end up missing 8 of the first 9 this year minimum.
Yeah, obviously very disturbing news for the Seahawks and Nwosu specifically. I think that it's doubly concerning considering the fact that Derick Hall, who I would argue is Seattle's second most physical edge defender behind only Uchenna Nwosu, is also dealing with the injury. He has a foot injury that kept him out of practice on Monday, kept him out of practice on Tuesday. And that's considering the fact that both of these practices were essentially glorified walkthroughs. That is very disturbing news here for the Seahawks. Uchenna Nwosu, let's just kind of focus there for just a moment. As you said, Corbin, he is Seattle's best edge run defender. And I think it's because of his physicality. I think it's because of his instincts. And again, this is a significant loss for the Seahawks against the San Francisco 49ers this week, because the 49ers are always going to be looking to run the football. They have a very, very good left tackle in Trent Williams, a future Hall of Famer, a good right tackle in Colt McKivitz. We'll be talking about this a little bit more when we get into our breakdowns of the key matchups here. But again, this is disturbing news for the Seahawks. And while I do believe that there's a chance that Derick Hall is going to be able to get back onto the field for the Seahawks, right now that leaves Boye Mafe, who has been struggling with injuries a little bit himself. And it may wind up being a player like a Mike Morris or Travis Gibson, who is basically asked to play a little bit in Uchenna Nwosu's absence. And so, again, very disturbing news for the Seahawks here with the 49ers, their divisional opponent, of course, just 2 days away.
Yeah, and the news of Nwosu going into reserve, the Seahawks did not announce that officially today. They really don't need to do that until Thursday. They're going to want to do it before the game on Thursday, because if they don't, then that clock for 4 games is going to start over for week 7. And so he would have to miss the next 4 games after missing Thursday's game. So he is going to end up on injured reserve before the game on Thursday. But this is a short week. They weren't going to be flying anybody in to try them out to see if they could sign them 2 days before a game. They weren't going to go that method. They're going to have to go in-house. I would put my money that it's going to be Jamie Sheriff that's going to be making his Seahawks regular season debut. I expect they're going to move him to the 53-man roster, and they might even move up Tyrek Smith from the practice squad. They might have both those guys on hand for this game because the depth concerns they have there, especially if Derick Hall can't go. You're missing Hall, you're missing Uchenna Nwosu. You're going to need as many bodies on hand as you can to try to deal with this 49ers offense. As far as the rest of the injury report goes, because we are really, this is the equivalent of a Thursday practice in a normal week. Looking at the injury report, we know Byron Murphy's out. We know Uchenna Nwosu is out. We don't know Derick Hall. The other injury that is concerning here is Reek Woolen, who we saw coming in and out of the lineup in the second half against the Giants on Sunday. He kept trying to come back in and give it a go after injuring his ankle. He is up in the air at this point. We don't know if with this quick turnaround, he's going to be able to play. And Julian Love today was limited with a hamstring injury. That is not the same injury that he had a couple weeks ago when he was dealing with a thigh bruise himself. So there are some concerning things here, but the good news is that Boye Mafe and Leonard Williams, who the Seahawks are still monitoring with that rib injury, he did play this weekend, but they were both listed as estimates to be full participants. Remember, they walked through today, not a regular practice. If they had a regular practice, the estimates that both those guys would have been full participants. That bodes well to have both of them. So you at least hope to have Boye Mafe here. That defensive line just continues to deal with injuries. It's a group that's been ravaged by them. And I guess there's a silver lining here, Rob. After this Thursday game that you're hoping you can find a way to win, you do get a mini bye, a little extra time to try to get some of these players right moving into the latter part of the first half of the schedule here.
Yeah, that's obviously something that can be comforting. I mean, the Seattle's going to get a little bit of time to kind of lick their wounds, but at the same time, the development with Tariq Woolen is very concerning. As you said, he was injured, got back onto the field, but you're talking about an ankle injury at a cornerback. That is, very problematic because obviously you need to be able to change directions. And that is something that's very difficult to do when you are dealing with any type of a significant ankle injury. Look, kudos to Uchenna Nwosu, kudos to Tariq Woolen for both fighting to get back onto the field. But, I think that the Seahawks have to kind of play the long game here. These are two players that the Seattle's not going to be able to make any kind of significant playoff run, at least in my opinion, without these two football players. So I do believe that Seattle would be wiser to sit them both down. Obviously, it's already basically been announced here with Uchenna Nwosu that he is out, regardless of the report from others outside of the team. But Mike McDonald said it himself. Uchenna Nwosu was out. With Tariq Woolen, we don't know for sure. But again, considering this is a short week, considering the nature of the injury, the fact that he was on the field against the Giants and then had to leave the field. Nehemiah Pritchett was Seattle's replacement for him. Is the rookie going to wind up starting against a Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk? Or a Juwan Jennings for that matter? That is, again, very concerning. I will say this. It's not that I want to characterize any injury for any team as good news. But if you are just strictly a Seahawks fan, the fact that the 49ers are dealing with some significant injuries of their own is something to note. Taliwano Hufanga, the big-time safety for the 49ers, he is also going to be out for significant time. He has some wrist ligament in that is going to limit him for this next several weeks. He is definitely going to be out against this game against the Seahawks. The 49ers backup safety at this point is a rookie, Malik Mustafa, player you and I were both very high, and we talked about him briefly in yesterday's show, Corbin, but that is a significant injury for the 49ers as well because their depth is going to be tested again, just like the Seahawks may be replacing their cornerback and Reek Woolen with a rookie in Nehemiah Pritchett. the 49ers might be doing the exact same thing at the safety position with the rookie in Malik Mustafa. So again, the 49ers have some injuries as well. They lost their kicker, actually. Jake Moody was injured on a kick return, and so he is injured. And then now they have a new kicker, Matthew Wright. Unfortunately for Seahawks fans, Travarius Ward, their very talented corner, Fred Warner, their very talented inside linebacker, George Kittle, all returned back to the practice field on Tuesday, albeit in a limited walkthrough type of environment.
Yeah, they've got some injuries. They've got some players returning. It really seems like it's kind of a similar situation for both these teams on a short week where you are just trying to ease guys back in with these walkthroughs, make sure they're getting the mental stuff done, and then hopefully they're physically good enough that they can play on Thursday night. That's the reality of these Thursday games in general. When we come back, because we have a Thursday night game, it's Matchup Tuesday. We're going to be diving into some of the key matchups when the Seahawks are on defense going up against the 49ers offense in week 6. That's coming up next here on Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets when you place your first $5 bet. You can bet on everything from Ken Walker III scoring a touchdown against the 49ers, or Jackson Smith-Njigba being the first player in Thursday's game with a 30-plus yard reception. Just throw in a $5 bet and you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. This episode is also brought your way by Hillsdale College. History, economics, the great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. Did you study any of these things in school? Whether you did or not, it's probably time for a refresher. Time and technology have changed a lot of things, but they have not changed basic fundamental truths about the world and our place in it. Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, 40 free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning of the history in the Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic, and a brand new documentary-style course on Marxism, socialism, and communism. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. Again, hillsdale.edu/lockedon. Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined as always by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you as always. Ricky, Locked On Seahawks, your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. For your second listen, don't forget about the new Locked On NFL. 2 episodes every day. First, you got the bad man Tyrel Rowland kicking things off with a double shot of NFL Espresso, and then the barber himself, Tony Wiggins, for some real NFL talk. Add in the Locked On local experts. You get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL twice a day. Make it your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. It's Matchup Tuesday. I keep having to double check, and I'm like, hey, this is normally a Wednesday show. But because the Seahawks are playing on Thursday night, we have to condense our week. It's just like the players trying to cram in stuff for this midweek test that they don't normally have to. We're doing the same thing here on Locked On Seahawks. Let's talk Seahawks defense against the 49ers offense, which even though they're 2-3, this offense has still been one of the better offenses in the NFL. They rank in the top 10 in most significant categories. And really, that boils down to the fact that they still have one of the best offensive lines in the NFC, at least when you're looking at the tackle positions. Trent Williams, future Hall of Famer, still playing at an incredibly high level. And we talked about the injuries that Seattle's dealing with off the edge. They're hoping they have Boye Mafe and Derick Hall in this game. They're not going to have Uchenna Nwosu. Regardless of who is playing off the edge, though, Trent Williams is going to be a really tricky matchup that, the 49ers, they're going to want to run his direction. And certainly the pass protection aspect, protecting Brock Purdy, is going to be a big deal as well.
Yeah, no question about it. And I want to focus in on the run blocking just for a moment. I mean, that to me is one of the things that Trent Williams does so incredibly well. And of course, something that the Seahawks have struggled with, including in this past loss against the New York Giants. And so, as we said, Uchenna Nwosu is out. You're hoping that you have Derick Hall, who, again, in my opinion, is the second most physical edge defender that the Seahawks have. If you lose them, then Boye Mafe is going to be the guy at the edge rusher position. And he has been a little bit hit and miss in terms of his physicality, his run fits. So that is very much a position of concern for the Seahawks. Look, I expect Dre'Mont Jones to probably get the start if Derick Hall is unable to go. Dre'Mont Jones again, opposite of Boye Mafe. I think that you're going to see an awful lot of Mike Morris playing that outside linebacker role. He did a lot of that when Nwosu and Derick Hall were out in this past game, and that's a big body. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's 6'6", 290 pounds. So again, that is going to be able to give Seattle some girth at the point of attack. Is he going to be able to possess enough agility to be able to track down, say, a Jordan Mason, or be able to create some pass rush on a Brock Purdy, who is a pretty slippery slippery runner and scrambler himself. So again, that is the concern for me. Certainly there's a possibility of Travis Gibson. You mentioned Jamie Sheriff as a possibility as well. That to me, while everybody's going to focus on the skill position talent for the 49ers, and for good reason, but I still believe, as you do, that the line of scrimmage is where this game is going to be won and lost.
Yeah, and you threw out a couple of those other names like a Jamie Sheriff. Welcome to the big leagues, because if he's going to be going up against Trent Williams, that's a big difference from when he was putting up all those pressures and sacks in the preseason. Now, he did play in one regular season game for Carolina early this year, didn't have any stats in that game. So this would not technically be his regular season NFL debut, but nonetheless, this would be pretty high stakes to be throwing a undrafted rookie, one that was signed in early August, into the fire. So Seattle's got some questions there. We'll see who's healthy. If they have Derick Hall available to go with Boye Mafe, then that makes things a little bit better. But you need Dre'Mont Jones to start playing to that contract, and we just haven't seen it happen yet to this point. The next matchup we got to talk about anytime you're playing the 49ers, I don't care if Christian McCaffrey is not healthy. Jordan Mason's playing like an all-pro right now, and this is what the Shanahans do. And I don't think Mike McDonald liked the joke that I made a couple of days ago in the Monday press conference when I was saying that you could put a water boy in the backfield for the Broncos back in the day for Mike Shanahan. But that's what it has felt like all these years, that they can just plug and play anybody back there and they can run the football effectively. So Jordan Mason, he's the next in line. And going against Seattle's linebackers, Mike McDonald made it clear the other day, the second level run fits, that is where they have had their issues. If you don't get that fixed real quick here, the 49ers, especially the pre-snap motion that they do, Jordan Mason is going to run roughshed on you.
No question about it. And I love the fact that those of you who are watching on YouTube can see that the Corbin listed Jerome Baker here specifically. And I love the fact that we are highlighting Jerome Baker, because I thought of Seattle's inside linebackers against the Giants that Baker was easily Seattle's best. I would argue that he was better than most of their safety play. Look, Rayshawn Jenkins did a nice job with the scoop and score, but otherwise he made an awful lot of missed tackles. And so the secondary defenders that Mike McDonald basically kind of pinned some of the blame on for Seahawks' loss against the Giants, Tyrel Dodson in particular, I think has got to be much, much better in this football game. Look, I will call myself out. I was one of the people who was kind of championing the signing of Tyrel Dodson, but he did not play very well against the New York Giants. And again, just given the way that the Shanahans have run the ball so well, obviously specifically Kyle Shanahan here with the 49ers and previously Mike Shanahan all those years with the Denver Broncos, they just run the ball incredibly well. And Jordan Mason is a terrific back. He's got instincts, he's got physicality, he's got speed, he's got body control. He's able to spin and bounce his way off of contact. This is a legitimate, talented back that just happens to be playing in a system that is perfectly suited to his skill set. So as we talked about just a moment ago, I really think that this is a game that's going to be won or lost in the trenches. But I also think that the Seahawks inside linebacker specifically, Tyrel Dodson, Jerome Baker, if it's Drake Thomas, if it's Tyrese Knight, whoever the Seahawks have at the inside linebacker position, they have got to be able to wrap up cleanly with the San Francisco running backs. Jordan Mason, of course, is the headliner, but watch out for the fullback. We talked about Kyle Juszczyk in the past and how effective that he can be. Don't be surprised if he and the running back Brock Purdy also get their share of action as well.
One last matchup that really has taken the forefront here in this game. Normally, we would be talking George Kittle and the tight ends, but Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Juwan Jennings, who's leading the team in receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns. He's actually been their number one guy this year, ironically enough. But those receivers going up against a Seahawks cornerback group that may be without Riq Woolen. If I had to predict right now, I do not think Woolen's playing in this game because of Thursday nighter. If it was Sunday, there might be a fighting chance that he can get back, but I don't think he's playing, which puts a ton of pressure on the secondary. Yeah, you've still got Devin Witherspoon. You've still got Trey Brown, who's hoping to bounce back from what was easily the worst game of his career on Sunday against the Giants. You're hoping that he plays at a much higher level, but you mentioned Nehemiah Pritchett earlier. The rookie got his first 12 defensive snaps against the Giants. He did have that huge third down pass breakup that gave the Seahawks a chance to go down and kick that game-tying field goal that unfortunately got blocked, but they wouldn't have had that possession without that pass breakup. He also should have given up a touchdown to Darius Slayton, but Daniel Jones overthrew it. So it was a mixed bag first game. I'm going to throw a name out here, Rob. I know that Nehemiah Pritchett did some nice things in that limited action, but you've got to call up Artie Burns from the practice squad for this game. He has got to be in the lineup, in my opinion. You've got to start Artie Burns, who has played against the 49ers before, seasoned veteran, has started a lot of games in this league. That is a guy that can also play in the slot as well. So you could have Devin Witherspoon play on the outside some, and you could put Artie Burns in the slot, and he can handle that. He has proven he can do that. But regardless, there is going to be a drop-off from having Riq Woolen out there with his athletic traits. The Seahawks don't have anybody else that can come close to that in their depth at the quarterback room, which is going to create some issues against a really good 49ers receiving core.
Yeah, an excellent 49ers receiving core. Although I would say this, it's been a receiving core that looks better on paper than it has in reality. Look, Deebo Samuel is one of the most physically gifted wide receivers in all of the NFL. Certainly don't have to remind Seahawk fans of that fact. But last week in the loss to the Arizona Cardinals, Corbin, he had one catch for 11 yards. He's had more rushes, 2 in every game, than he has had catches half the time. Brandon Ayuk absolutely went off. He had 8 catches for 147 yards. That was 3 times as many yards as he had in any other game this season. He is the one that concerns me the most because for the Seahawks perspective, just because of the fact that, again, if you don't have Tariq Woolen, then I don't know if the Seahawks have a corner who can run with a Brandon Ayuk. And we saw too many vertical shots from Daniel Jones for the Seahawks to be able to kind of just rest on their laurels and think that they are going to be able to play a relatively untested rookie like a Nehemiah Pritchett on the outside against a guy in Brandon Ayuk who does feel like he is just kind of starting to get into the groove. Juwan Jennings has been terrific for the 49ers so far, but I would say this, he had one monster performance against the LA Rams, all 3 of his touchdowns, which again lead the 49ers receivers in touchdowns. All 3 of them came against the LA Rams, and he was wide open in all 3 of them. So I do think that the Seahawks are set up to be able to potentially handle the 49ers wide receivers because, as you said, they have a very good player at Artie Burns. Just seeing there on the practice squad, this feels like a natural game to promote him up to the active roster. At the same time, it doesn't really matter. If you don't get any kind of pressure on Brock Purdy, he is accurate and smart enough. He's going to be able to pick apart this injury-plagued Seattle secondary.
When we come back, we're going to flip the script. Seahawks on offense going up against the 49ers defense. That'll be coming up next here on Matchup Tuesday on the Locked On Seahawks podcast. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at Game Time. You shouldn't have to think about skipping a car payment when you want to buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, and comedy near you. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Do you want to see the Kraken as they start their 4th season? I can't believe I'm saying that. It's already their 4th season playing at Climate Pledge Arena. You can now get seats at one of the nicest venues in the NHL for under $150. Great seats at a great venue to watch an exciting hockey team that hopes to get back to the postseason this year. Game Time has deals on tickets right at the day of the event, and the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price to write your own memories. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time by downloading the Game Time app, creating an account, and using the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Welcome back to Matchup Tuesday here on the Locked On Seahawks podcast. It's your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you, as always, for listening in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks playing on Thursday night this week against the 49ers, which means we have to condense our schedule. We've got a ton of key matchups to still dive into. Seahawks on offense against the 49ers on defense. And look, Rob, anytime that these two teams tangle, you always have to highlight first and foremost the matchup of the tackles going up against the edge rushers for the 49ers. They do have Leonard Floyd now as that complementary piece, but this is still all about Nick Bosa, one of the elite defensive players in the entire NFL. And the Seahawks, unfortunately, have felt his wrath far too many times. You're going to have to dedicate extra attention to try to keep him away from Geno Smith in this game. And it's going to be a difficult task for Charles Cross and Stone Forsythe to have to deal with him off the edge.
Yeah, that's why, as I mentioned before, I really do think this is going to be a game. It's going to be either won or lost along the trenches. Nick Bosa is a terrific football player. That said, again, it's kind of like the what we talked about with the wide receiver position for the 49ers. He's almost been paper than he has been in reality. Through 5 games, he has only, I put that in quotations, only 3 sacks so far this season. Of course, it would be very much like Nick Bosa on a nationally televised game, especially against a Seahawks offensive line that, look, Charles Cross is a good football player, but he's been beaten by Nick Bosa, and certainly Stone Forsythe with his struggles with leverage. I think that is a matchup that is absolutely terrifying for the Seahawks. 3 sacks from Nick Bosa, 2 sacks from Leonard Floyd. Leonard Floyd, of course, has been an absolute Seahawk killer in the past, primarily with his time with the LA Rams. Again, you know that Ryan Grubb called himself out and said that they are going to look to run the football here, but still, you know that the Seahawks offense kind of lives and dies right now with number 7, Geno Smith. If you can't keep him upright, then this game could become a laugher very, very quickly. And so stopping the 49ers two-headed monster pass rushers and Nick Bosa and Leonard Floyd is absolutely paramount to their having any type of consistency and success on offense.
I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball for our second matchup here, but this is one that you and I both have thrown out going into this episode. Everybody wants to talk DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jack Smith, and Jigba. And the 49ers, they've got Javarius Ward back healthy, so they're going to be at full strength at cornerback positions for the most part. Ambry Thomas has been out all year, so they're missing some pieces there. But nonetheless, that would be a positional battle that obviously would be worth focusing on. But I want to shift the attention to the tight ends against the safeties, because you mentioned this earlier. Hufanga, former All-Pro, coming off a torn ACL. It's kind of an Uchenna Nwosu type situation. He gets back from a serious injury and then just can't stay healthy. Now he's got wrist tendons that are torn, so he's not going to be playing this game. Malik Mustafa is going to start. They're also going to have Brown, who started a few games last year and had some big games against the Seahawks last season in the second half when Hufanga was out. But nonetheless, it's backup safeties that are going to be starting for San Francisco. And Mustafa is a really good player. You and I both liked him coming out of Wake Forest, but he can be beaten downfield at times, and he is not a big guy, at least in terms of height. You have to believe that Ryan Grubb, if he is game planning this week like we know he's capable of, he's got to be looking at this matchup saying, hey, I can use this as an extension of the run game a little bit. Let me get my tight ends involved here. Noah Fant, AJ Barner, he is quietly becoming somebody that Geno Smith seems to have a lot of trust in. I would not be shocked if AJ Barner gets a couple of catches in this football game, but I think the tight end position could be an area that the Seahawks can maybe get some traction against these safeties to take advantage of the size and athleticism they have at that spot and complement their receivers, open up the thing for DK Metcalf and company to make some big plays later in this game.
Yeah, this is a spot where the 49ers are a little bit vulnerable. Their Achilles speak. And I do think that the Seattle's tight ends I'm waiting for that breakout performance from them. We saw flashes of it in an earlier victory, but I also believe that again, the way that AJ Barner is playing, I think that Noah Fant is just ripe for one of those seam throws where he catches the ball over the top and kind of runs away from people, shows that 4.4 speed that he has always possessed. I wouldn't even be surprised if we see a Brady Russell appearance in this game. The only tight end I didn't mention there is Pharaoh Brown, and that's because I do expect the Seattle is going to use Pharaoh Brown if he is healthy, also nursing injury, that they're going to use Pharaoh Brown a lot as a blocker. And that to me is kind of the factor here that you have to acknowledge, is that again, if the Seahawks cannot pass protect, if they cannot get any kind of movement in the running game, then they are going to have to keep their tight ends in tight next to their tackles and not allow them to release into coverage. I would love for Ryan Grubb to feel confident enough to use his tight ends because again, as you just mentioned, for all the reasons that you just mentioned, the 49ers safeties do appear vulnerable. Jair Brown's a good football player. Malik Mustafa is an absolute missile. He just doesn't change directions that well, but he comes downhill quickly, aggressively, confidently. He does have some missed tackles on tape. So again, I do believe that there is a possibility to create a catch, a little bit of a wiggle and a run after the catch kind of possibilities for Seattle's tight ends. But again, paramount is going to be creating some push along the line of scrimmage and giving Geno Smith some time in the pocket. And I think that Seattle's tight ends might be playing a big role in that regard as well.
I'd be remiss not to mention the run game here because, look,
sure,
if the Seahawks are not going to run the football or at least stick with it, we saw what happened on Sunday against the Giants. If the Seahawks come out in this game and they're trying to sling the pigskin all over the place at an 80% rate like they did, this game is going to get ugly. You are not going to be able to do that against the San Francisco 49ers. You're going to get your quarterback killed. Geno Smith is not going to make it through the 4 quarters if you do that. They have got to establish the running game, particularly Ken Walker III. And look, this is still a good linebacking core, but away from Fred Warner, they don't have Dre Greenlaw right now. He is still on the PUP list. They've had some defections of that position in free agency the last couple of years. This has been a front seven that has at times looked vulnerable. Now, the numbers overall this year are solid, but they had a few games this year where they've had some issues slowing down the run. And in part, that's because they have had some big losses on their defensive line. The linebacker spot away from Fred Warner is not as good as it has been without Greenlaw being available. This feels like a matchup here that could swing into Seattle's favor. At the same time, we know just how darn good Fred Warner is too. So Warner going up against Walker and Charbonnet, that by itself, that is going to be a really fun matchup. You want to see if Ken Walker III's juice, his explosiveness, can create some plays for the Seahawks, both in the run game and the passing game. I think they're going to need to get a solid game from both their running backs to have any shot to win this one on Thursday night.
Yeah, no question about it. The 49ers, Fred Warner is one of the elite players, not just inside linebackers. Of course, he's among the elite inside linebackers. He's among the elite players in all of the NFL. I'd argue that Dexter Lawrence of the New York Giants is also one of those elite players, and that's why we kind of focused in on him. I really think that this is as I mentioned before, the line of scrimmage is where this game is going to be won or lost. But I think if the Seahawks don't have at least 75 net rushing yards in this football game, it doesn't sound like much, but it'll be a heck of a lot more than they had against the New York Giants. If they don't have at least that, then as you said, Corbin, this could be a laugher for the 49ers. And that's the thing, is the 49ers just aren't playing that good of football. I mean, they come into this game stumbling themselves. They're 2-3. Their 2 victories are against the New York Jets squad that, of course, just fired their head coach, Robert Saleh, and against the New England Patriots. They played against the Minnesota Vikings and lost. They played against the Cardinals and lost. They played against the Rams and lost. Look, I mean, this is a squad that's a little bit desperate, and as good as they sound on paper, I mean, I'm going to sound like Winston Churchill. Seahawks fans, the only thing you have to fear is fear itself. I mean, this is a 49ers squad that has a bunch of good players on paper, but they haven't been playing all that well. Now, Fred Warner is a notable exception. but at the same time, Ken Walker is a difference maker. And Ryan Grubb basically called himself out in the press conference. I thought it was refreshing today when he basically acknowledged, look, this is 100% on me, just didn't make the play calls and to get the ball into Kenneth Walker's hand. I think that he is the kind of a guy that can turn this game on its head. We saw the splashy plays that he had on the road against Detroit. This is another game that is a must-win kind of a football game. I think you have to put the ball in number 9's hand as much as possible, in number 14's hand as much as possible, because those are your two best players. And so if the Seahawks are going to go down, then go down swinging. That's the way to beat the 49ers.
As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, look, it's a different week. We got Thursday night football coming up. We're going to be diving into our Game Plan Wednesday coming up tomorrow. Make sure that you're listening in. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday and go Hawks.